Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Well, welcome again to another exciting podcast here through CSRM and also Seed Sports and UW Sports Ministry as we are talking about Reach Reflections. My name is Dan Stoffer. I'm joined again with Dr. Greg Linville, Bob Schindler, and Dr. Tim Conrad. And we've been talking a lot about the REACHGathering, and I think it's been fantastic. Hopefully, you've been encouraged to register. If you haven't already, please go to reachgathering.org, find out more information, talk to your leadership, invite your volunteers. If you have anything to do anywhere around the world in sports, rec, or fitness ministry, this is for you. And so we talked about who it's for, what a typical reach looks like, and kind of how it came into being. I'd love for us to and we teased this in our last podcast, I'd love for us to talk today about what are some of the trends you see in the sports ministry movement, the rec ministry movement, fitness as well, and how can Reach in the future do a good job of talking about these trends. So Dr. Tim Conrad, we're going to start with you. Tell us kind of what you see, what concerns you, what's exciting, where we have been, and where we're going when it comes to Reach.
Yeah, I do get excited about this idea, and part of me always wants me and Jack Sparrow, give me that horizon. I want to go see that. And so the idea is that's a part of who I am. And so me being a part of the movement for these years it still excites me, because I ask this question all the time of people. I say, are the churches pre-COVID back to post-COVID? Are all the churches that are they back? Are they back to what they were, the vibrant thing that you thought they were before COVID? And the answer comes back, no. They're still figuring out how to get back. And then I say this. Hey, remember when we couldn't go to things publicly and the players had to play sports in the arenas and there was nobody in the stands? Remember that? Hey, has sports come back? Have you seen full stadiums? The answer is, yeah, absolutely. Oh, really? That's interesting, isn't it? Sports has come back and the church hasn't. Wow. Gee, I wonder what happened. Well, what I'm saying is we weren't who we thought we were. That's what is it, Dennis Green? They were who we thought they were, in the famous line. No, they weren't what we thought they were. The church has a big issue. The church has massive problems in terms of who were we and who are we, and our culture and all the divisions and everything that's happening. We have the answer. That's the point. We have the answer, but we don't know how to tell people and how to grow people and how to take something and change it. And so we're at a very vulnerable time. And I believe that the sports ministry movement is at that same place. If the sports ministry movement is to be based on the church and the church is struggling, well, sports ministry is going to struggle. And so if we think we have the answer, which we think we do, all three of us on this call think we do, then we need to start waving the flag and doing podcasts just like this and doing all kinds of things to help the church find a way to be relevant in this culture. And I think sports obviously is a great tool, and we all still believe it. And you know what? The tool still works. So there you go. There's my 60 seconds plus.
And it was well said, Tim. And I think the idea that we're seeing stadiums filled and churches are struggling, that's very interesting. And it's definitely something that churches should lean into, because we do have this solution, and it's the gospel of Jesus. And very practically, sports rec and fitness could be a solution to help our churches as we strengthen those different ministries. So love to open up the floor to the rest of you guys. What do you see on the horizon, or what's our current reality? Because the last few years have been very challenging, very difficult for everyone everywhere. What trends do you see when it comes to this movement?
Dan, if I could weigh in on how Reach is even trying to deal with this. And we have what we call our three-tier paradigm, the theological truths that inform philosophical principles, that then what emerges out of that are methodological models. And why we say it that way, and all of our tracks, the presenters, they identify which of those tiers, those levels that they're going to be speaking to. And they could speak to all three, or they could focus on one. But the importance of this is that because our community, this movement is athletes and coaches, and we're active. And so we just start doing, and we don't think about it a lot. And then we wonder why we're not being successful. Why isn't this really effective? And it's often because we haven't thought about it well. We haven't gone to the Bible and developed a good theology. And so to pick up on what Tim was saying there, that I think a lot of it has to do with how we view the church, what we call ecclesiology, what we think about how people come to salvation, how they come to a personal relationship with Christ. That's what we call soteriology. And then how do we get that gospel-centric message out there? That's the missiology. And it's all based upon Christology. And how do we do that? And so another reason people should come to the Reach Gathering is because our tracks and our input is built on that. And we recognize that if we start throwing soteriology around very often, people are going to not come, or they're not going to stick around very long. So we touch that theological stuff, give the foundation, but then most of it, 60 to 70%, is in that methodological, but it's built on the first 10 and 20% of the theology and philosophy. And so let me just put this in practical terms. A lot of the methodology within the sports outreach community, when Tim talks about sacred cows, we're still trying to feed those, even though they're emaciated and dying more and more. And we talked about World Cup and possibilities of World Cup. But I'll bet you that most of what the sports outreach community is going to do is try to get what we call the mega models. In other words, we're going to try to get a large group of people together and have them hear the testimony of this mega athlete that's out there. But what research is starting to show is that the only people that show up to that are the people who are already Christians. Very few show up to that aren't Christians. So is that really evangelizing? Oh, we'll put them in a magazine, or we'll have them write a book, or we'll do a podcast. The only people that are reading and listening are Christians. That mega model is a sacred cow that used to work. It isn't working now. And I'm gonna wrap this up with this. Why do the three of us, why do the four of us, why do our ministries, why does Reach believe that this is a strategy? Because it speaks the language that the culture is speaking, not just the sport and fitness, but also, if I'm going to preach at somebody, they're walking away. But people, it doesn't matter if you're talking today about gender or about finance or about politics or racism or whatever. It's all about my personal experience. It's my personal testimony. And this is what the sports outreach movement, particularly in the local church, maximizes on. A guy at the end of a basketball game shares the testimony about what Christ has done in their life. A gal in a fitness class at the end of that class talks about, this week, Jesus spoke to me. This is my testimony. And this is what's accepted today in the secular, increasingly secular culture. And even in countries where Christians are persecuted, if the people share their testimony, people listen. That's why reach is so important and why what we're doing is so important, because we have a theology that leads to a methodology that is incredibly effective.
Yeah, I want to just add just some further thoughts on that. Some people have wondered, what's really the future of sports ministry? If the future of the church is threatening, or threatened in the United States, what's the future of sports ministry? And the answer that I personally believe is it depends upon how you define sports ministry. See, I think what Tim enumerated was there is certainly a growing disinterest in the local church, quote, quote, in the United States, maybe even a distrust for Christianity as a broad answer to the problems of life, that all come from a misunderstanding. We know that. The four of us on this call know that. And the church has gotten away with not having to build relationships and trust to be able to have the conversations that can tear down those misunderstandings and misconceptions. And Amen. So the church in the future is going to need bridges more than they've ever needed them before, at least in the last 50 years in our culture. Because the preconceptions that people have, a worldview is so different today that you can't just assume that they believe there's a God, that they accept the Bible as authority, all those things. So you've got to connect with them in another way on a repetitive basis to get close enough to build the trust. And so to me, the churches that are really serious about making disciples, I think, are going to be more interested in sports as a bridge than they've been in maybe the last 20 years. But it may not look the same as it has the last 20 years. It may not be a centralized, facility-driven, build a gym, build a facility, and that's gonna be the way to do it. I'm in favor of, as long as people are coming, I'd say use the facility, use that strategy, but don't let that be the only strategy. Come up with other ideas where you're moving out instead of asking people to come in. So I've talked to a number of churches that are already thinking that way in a very, very innovative, very out of the box way of how can they actually are talking about going into the sports rec and fitness business outside of the church to have a place where they could connect that doesn't have all of the misconceptions then that coming into the local church might do. So I think the forward thinkers are already realizing some of this, and they're giving thought to, okay, we need a bridge, and what's the best bridge that Greg said? What's the best bridge that Tim said? What's the best bridge today? It's sports, rec and fitness. It is the best bridge. It's not the only one, but it is the best one. And that's interesting enough. If you really got down to the heart of all four of us, that's why we're in sports ministry. It's not because we love sports. It's because I know the other two guys better than I know you, Dan, but I believe most sports ministers, their deep heart is they want to reach people. and they're in sports ministry because they think this is the great way to reach people. I know that for Tim, and I know that for Greg, and from the little I've been around you, Dan, I think that's true for you as well. And so I think the future has some real possibilities to it if we're willing to think a little non-traditionally and let go of some of the sacred cows that we've already just sort of skirted around.
You know, what's fascinating, you know, Tim opened up with, you know, the very interesting illustration that we have filled stadiums and gymnasiums. The churches really haven't been filled back up for the most part. And then I think about just the state of our country. Just think about like the last 3, 4, 5 years, how divided we are. We can't agree on hardly anything, even in our churches. But people will come together, set aside their differences to cheer for a very specific team or to participate in a sport. And so if there is something that could unite here in our country, Bob, I think you're spot on. Sports rec and fitness could be the biggest solution of all for our local churches. And so these are the kinds of things that we'll be talking about at Reach, both now and on to the future. So if you are a sports minister, if you have any sort of experience or any sort of ministry in sports rec or fitness, the Reach Gathering is for you. So you can talk about things like this, so you can be equipped and encouraged with some of these innovative ideas to find out how you can reach our culture that is rapidly changing, and it can be very discouraging. And sometimes we don't know how in the world we're going to survive in ministry and continue to be relative and relevant. And I think there's opportunities when we gather together with other people to talk about these sorts of things. So we've got about 5 minutes left in this podcast here, and I just want to continue the conversation. So any other trends or any other concerning or exciting things that Reach is going to be talking about both this year and on into the future? What topics come to mind? What trends come to mind?
Tim, anything else you want to add to what you were already building on earlier?
Yeah, I want to get together a little seminar on the death of Sunday school. I would just like to be able to talk about that out like in the open and see if people realize that it's dying. And so, I mean, I got people in my church that would think, "What in the world are you saying?" So, anyways, there you go. Death of Sunday school.
And if you have an email concern for that, the email address is tim@wsportsministry.org.
My pastor doesn't agree, just so you know.
He might be listening to this right now.
Yeah, I hope not. I'm not going to let him know.
Well, I would say one other thing that Tim brought up earlier that I really want to highlight. God is sovereignly created an opportunity in the United States in 2026 and 2028 that is very strategic.
Yeah.
And that's the coming of the World Cup to Mexico, US, and Canada in 26, and the Olympics to LA in 2028. And I think that's the place, going back to what Greg said, where we need to be innovative and strategic in how we're going to actually take advantage of that opportunity and think differently than maybe let's just do what we've done in the past. But we have a unique opportunity. Greg mentioned in a previous podcast, we were in Egypt in 2006, and I flew through Germany in that 2006. And that was the year Germany hosted the World Cup. And it was going on when we flew through Germany. And it was wild. It was wild. You imagine. And we flew to Egypt, and everywhere we went in Egypt, they had the World Cup on. I mean, it didn't matter how small the store was or how big. There were TVs everywhere, and they're watching. And I flew back to the United States, and I got off the plane, and I asked some people, what happened in the World Cup? And they were like, what's the World Cup? That was 06. Now, fast forward to 2022. There's a watch party here in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's growing significantly in the US in terms of our attention or our awareness, and that is just going to move forward for the next 4 years. It's going to be a big deal. And if you add onto it the huge immigrant and refugee population that's been brought to the US in the last 20 years, now you've got an opportunity to take advantage not of a big event, but to use that for relational connection with a group of people that maybe you're struggling to connect with. So I just, Tim's brought that up, and I wish you'd have been the one instead of me, but because I know you're really passionate about it. But this is something we need to be praying about. We need to be thinking about. We need to be working together on how, God, do you want us to take advantage of this Pentecost Passover where everybody's coming to us? What can we do to take advantage of and expand the kingdom of God there? So
it's 48 countries coming instead of 32. It's exponential in turn. It's already exponential from the moment, but it's exponential in who we can engage with, and material wise, how we can train and disciple. And there's a quarter of the countries of the planet are going to come together.
Yeah, and there were I don't know if you guys saw this. There were 100,000 Mexicans in Qatar.
Yeah,
100,000 people flew.
No, listen. This is what I learned years and years ago. In America, you don't go to the Super Bowl unless you got a ticket. The rest of the world, they go to wherever those events are. What? They don't have a ticket. They just want to be there.
Yeah, and so that's the venues around that are so important. Then the watch, the fan sites and all that kind of stuff. So
no. And the church, if the church somehow could get a hold of this idea and do it within the theology, I think we just got to keep pounding. Back to the three, and the theology, which brings the philosophy, which brings the methodology, and that's the difference, because we already had church and sports here. Okay, that's done, but we need to either refine it or kill it. But the point is that the church has to see that we're their partner.
Well, guys, this has been a great 2 hours.
It has been
spent together. For those of you that are watching or listening, we've been together for a couple hours and breaking it up in 20 minutes, so you can watch or listen to this on your commute to work or as you get on your treadmill or whatever you do. But please go back to the previous 3 or 4 segments. If you want to know about Reach and you want to know how it started, you want to know how it's going, you want to know how to get in contact with, if you want to know how to become part of the leadership of it, we've covered a lot of things. And we hope that we're continuing to model what we're preaching. And that is that Reach brings us together, and it really catalyzes us in ways that we couldn't have been without each other. And so as we kind of wrapping up here, Dan, we'll give it back to you. But we're thinking, we just in this segment, we were like thinking, where are we going in overall? But it all comes back down to this. Reach will help you think about that.
Right.
Reach will connect you with those trends, will connect you with what's happening, and give you strategies to know how to do this very thing. Bob or Tim, any other last thing there? And then Dan, will turn it over to you. Wow,
man. I think that means we've reached our end. But I don't know about you guys, but I've been blessed just to be able to listen to you all and your passion, to know some more of the history, which is very exciting, but also to know that anytime you come together and you partner on anything like UW Sports and Seed Sports and CSRM have, that's a difficult thing, but we know we're better for it, and Reach is better because of it. And so we're excited. You heard about some of the potential trends we'll be talking about, how to really develop a good, sound theology and philosophy and methodology in order to kind of navigate through some of these different trends that are happening in our culture. You heard before my internet went down, you heard about, leveraging the World Cup, and there's opportunities there. And so we just, again, want to encourage you. Please register for the Reach Gathering in 2023. Go to reachgathering.org. You'll see different links there. There's an opportunity for you to get a group rate as well. Register for that. It's coming up here really soon. Invite people. If you're in sports and rec and fitness ministry, invite people on your team. Invite your senior pastor. Invite your elders if your church has those. Invite people to come and see what this could do for your local church. And on behalf of CSRM and UW Sports Ministry and Seed Sports Ministry, as we sponsored together for this, thank you for joining us in this really exciting series called the Reach Gathering Reflections. And we sure hope to see you this March. Take care.
The CSRM podcast is a production of CSRM and their production house, Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Craig Linville is the executive producer, and Scott Stedman is the associate producer and editor. To learn more about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. The CSRM podcast is the flagship member of the podcast network Overwhelming Victory Radio. For more information on Overwhelming Victory Radio, or to listen to our partner podcasts, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/OV Radio. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.